right. Man, we are here with Doug Leeby, the CEO of Beeline. I am so excited to have you, my friend.
Thanks, Pete.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for joining us.
Of course.
For the two recruiters and a microphone.
Yeah, fun to be with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, man, I just really want to talk a little bit with you and kind of find out your story and
Sure.
just kind of talk a little bit about, how you got to where you are and just give us the skinny.
It's not that exciting, man. This may be the worst podcast you ever do, but I'm happy to chat with you and answer any questions you have. Where would you like me to start?
Oh man, start from the beginning. Where were you originally from?
Syracuse, New York.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Upstate New York. Great place to grow up a kid at that time. Probably not as, I don't want to be disparaging and all the Syracusans are going to hate me all of a sudden. Yeah. Be a little bit more circumspect with my choice of words. But look, it fell on tough times, right? And so I got out of there after high school and it just really have never been back. But it was a great place to grow up. Public school system. Played a little soccer until I sucked bad enough that I couldn't make it to the high school team. Being my diminutive size, found wrestling as the outlet athletically.
Wow. I never knew you were a wrestler.
well,
See, this is good stuff.
But again, how good a wrestler? That's the follow-up question, but we're not going to ask that.
No,
right?
I won't ask that one.
Thank you for that. We'll let the audience, it'll just hang out there. I won some.
We'll let them guess how good you were.
Right. Hurt my knee and then couldn't go to the Olympics. So I decided to focus on academics.
Similar story to my swimming career.
Okay.
Except
Right.
with my shoulder.
Right.
Same situation. Yeah. Actually, always wanted to be an FBI agent. That was my dream. That or
Really?
CIA. Yep. So wanted to get in the Naval Academy. Did not get the congressional nomination for many reasons that are humorous to me now in life that weren't very humorous at the time. For example, when you go through the selection, they have a panel of civilians, folks like us, and then they'd be asking these young kids different questions. And this is back in the Nicaragua strife times. And so I remember this guy says, "Do you think we would be justified in utilizing nuclear weapons in Nicaragua?" And after I said yes, I sealed my fate for going to the Naval Academy. To be fair, I didn't know where Nicaragua was. Yeah, I thought it was way further than it is.
That's like an immediate
the
denial.
radiation might encroach,
Kind of a knockout question. Didn't even know what a knockout question was.
But that's a knockout question.
It truly, and thank God, right? I wouldn't allow me to go to the Naval Academy with that answer either. But
No.
I was a naive
Right
dude.
decision.
Yeah,
Yes.
just wailing on commies. That's what I thought the world was about. And so I didn't get to the Naval Academy, but I did hear about Vanderbilt with this great Navy ROTC program. And so that was one of the major reasons that drew me down to Nashville. So I ended up going there. And I did study history of Latin America and Russian studies and thought maybe I'd go CIA or eventually FBI still. Never did Naval ROTC, did the fraternity.
Yep.
Kind of got upside down.
Complete off. Yeah. One end of the spectrum. Yeah.
Correct. Got out of Vanderbilt looking for a job. Was on a plane with an FBI agent who said, "We're looking for people in HR." And I didn't really know what HR was at the time. And the grades were decent, but not, they weren't probably going to get me at the bureau. So I decided to go back and get a master's in HR. There's a new program. Back in the day, we called it HRD, Human Resource Development. It's iterated so many times. It's funny, my daughter's actually getting a master's in the same thing called, now it's organizational psychology. Much sexier.
It sounds so much better.
It's cool, right? Better than I got a master's in HRD.
It's like a dishwasher is like an aquatic engineer. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it sounds so much better.
It does.
Yeah.
I didn't
That's
have
what I
a
used to say
foresight.
when I was in high school at a dishwasher.
That's well played.
I'm an aquatic engineer.
So I'm that
wow.
and a CEO.
Man, that's awesome.
I'm still doing the dishes.
Yeah, I'm still doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got the master's and then
At Vanderbilt too?
did. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can't go into the bureau with just a master's. You need at least a year experience. So I went out. My dad was in consumer products. He ran 3 bottling plants upstate New York for Pepsi. So I grew up a Pepsi kid.
Yeah, he's got a good birthday, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best. Very, very bright people born on February 13th.
That's very true.
Brighter on the 10th, but regardless.
That's neither here nor there.
It isn't.
Yeah.
So I went into consumer products working for Pillsbury because I just got a headhunter. Didn't even know what a headhunter, back in the day, and here we are. But they lined me up with
And
a
here
job.
we are on a podcast called Two Recruiters.
Yeah. It's full circle.
It's a full circle.
Right?
Yeah.
If I'd only known.
Yeah.
I did 5 years at Pillsbury, and then I did 5 years at ConAgra Frozen. That I bumped around. So I was in Florida, I was up in D.C., I was in Minneapolis,
Wow.
Atlanta, and then here for Winn-Dixie. And with all respect to the industry, I was on a treadmill one day reading supermarket news.
There's a thing called supermarket
And
news. Wow.
That's how he found his wife. She actually passed him on the treadmill and was like, "Oh, excuse me, I couldn't oversee, but are you reading supermarket news?
I love that magazine.
Is that this month's? Is that the most recent edition?
A lot of people don't know. It's second read only to Harvard Business Review.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as far as we're concerned.
Huge publication.
Big for the intellectuals. I'm sure you haven't read it. But I was literally on this treadmill, and I said, "What the hell am I doing?" And I threw it on the ground, and I decided I was going to leave the industry. And I didn't know what to do.
What am I doing with myself?
Well, like, there's one thing to be on a treadmill. It's another to be reading supermarket news, right?
And both at the same time.
Yeah, right.
That's when you really do question.
Doug Leaby's all-time low moment.
There have been lower ones, but you're right. That was one of them.
That's up there.
Yeah. And again, no disrespect to the industry. It's just for me, it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Nor disrespect to the catalog.
Right.
Fantastic periodical. I highly recommend it, just not on a treadmill.
Right.
So I jumped ship. I knew a guy that was had come down to the MPS Group, which of course you guys know. Staffing firm.
Oh, yep.
And he was going to run scientific staffing, and I wanted to go run a sales organization. Love sales. I knew him.
You're pretty good at it, if I remember correctly.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. One of my mentors for sure.
Thank you. And so this guy basically hired me to run sales for scientific staffing, but that was 2000. So in essence, the economy was going bad, shutting down offices. That was my experience in staffing. And then, of course,
So you started in staffing in 2000?
I started by
that's when I
basically shutting
started.
down offices. So
Yeah, there you go. It was a great time.
I didn't have the success you had.
No.
But I did learn how to shut down offices.
That's right.
And then 9/11 came
Yep.
and hit us all in the gut and emotionally and business-wise, and we sold that off. And then the CEO at the time said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "I'm enamored with this little startup internally called Beeline, but I don't know anything about
So
technology."
this is when Richard White was just kind of like a spin-off idea or Jack?
No, this was all Tim Payne.
Oh, it's Tim.
Yeah,
wow,
this was Tim's brainchild. So
I never even knew that was Tim's
you didn't?
brainchild. No, I always kind of thought it was Richard's
oh gosh, no. Tim was
or even like Jack Cullen.
no
Like,
Jack's awesome dude, but he was just in there to run it. Same with Richard, but this was completely. Tim was people probably don't really know us, but a real visionary. Originally it was a marketplace, which of course is a big thing today.
right.
And it didn't really pan out that way. So he pivoted after Y2K and all the big nothing. And you remember, it was a good day for you. You guys were selling a lot of
Oh
IT
man,
labor.
yeah. If you could open a window, you'd get $100 an hour.
Well,
so
that's
it's great
right.
for us.
Enter Beeline, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Tim was smart enough to know he was making a bunch of money over here with the staffing, but it was going to come back to roost. And so he basically launched this product called Beeline. And I said, "I don't know anything about technology." He said, "You'll figure it out. Why don't you go run product management?" And I said, I don't know anything about product management. And he said, "Well, you'll figure it out." So here we are 24 years later.
Threw you into the wolves. Doug, you'll figure it out.
Well, there were no wolves, right?
Yeah.
It was just
It
kind
was
of
you.
it's just an idea that obviously blossomed. So here we are. That's the short version.
So yes, I mean, I always knew that it was. I was always kind of assumed it was Richard's brainchild. And so I don't know.
Richard was asked to come out and shut us down. Basically, he was going to evaluate because he was the CIO of the MPS Group,
Right.
and it wasn't making money. So they said, "Go figure out what's going on. Get ready to shut it down." And along the way, we had some success, and Richard actually fell in love with the company and us.
And stayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
He moved over.
He did.
What was the first customer that Beeline had?
The first real customer, or the first one on a PowerPoint.
Both.
I'm not going to answer that other one. It predated me. I got there and I was excited about the customer list, and then I realized
There isn't one.
they're interested. Let's just say,
yeah.
a different definition of customer than I was accustomed to. I usually tell the story. I think JPMC happened a month or two before Merrill Lynch, and the reason I tell that story is because one, as you guys will appreciate in our industry, was managed service provider and the technology, the BMS.
right. Yep.
That was Merrill Lynch. The other one was just technology. So we were providing both, but it was great because we're of a tale of two cities. You've got two behemoths side by side with different solutions.
And this was way back in the. I mean, this
Called
didn't have a lot of.
2001, 2002.
Yeah, no, like the competition out there was
there
Chimes and
there were hundreds.
there were hundreds that were doing this.
You hadn't heard of
industry
it.
VMS was like really starting to take off.
It was. And again, I think it's a byproduct of all of these procurement officers that were pretty ticked off at what had just happened with their bill rates. But, if you looked at staffing industry back then, they would have published 200 or 300 companies trying to do what we're all doing.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And so how many? So now fast forward to today, 600 plus employees, right? So when did you start? How many people were there?
Well, I was, I think, employee 34, so there were people that predated me, but yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shoot, man, that's crazy. And how many now? Over 600?
650.
650.
Plus
Global, too. Yeah. So, wow.
So Doug, what was your path being, number 34? And then, I guess the path to CEO. So what was that like, and what was the timeline there?
Well, so I got there in 2002. In 2010, I was president, and then we just changed the title of CEO when we merged with IQ Navigator. So we can talk about that later. But basically, I don't know how you guys are laughing. Sure. Both these guys work there, so they've got some insight. They know some skeletons.
We know where they're buried.
Yes, they do.
I guess I was there when Doug was president.
Oh, those were my worst years. It wasn't until I got the C title. My ego really took command. So I started in product management, and we didn't really have much of it. I mean, it was me, right? I didn't have a team at that point. I always loved sales. And you guys might remember the name Pat McCall, great guy in the industry. Yep. He was running sales. And they moved him out, I would say, rather unfairly. Pat was a great mentor, is to this day still. But when that vacancy occurred, I basically raised my hand and said, I'd really like to run sales. So that's what I did. And then Richard came over, and then we made a couple acquisitions, and then Mike Wacholtz and some other folks, and we started to grow, and then more of a GM role. And then Adecco bought us, and Richard left. Right. And then they were looking for a backfill, so I took that in 2010.
Yep. Yeah. And that was right after Adecco. Yeah, because I left MPS Group, and I think 2 or 3 weeks before Adecco bought them.
Okay.
Right. So it was all hush hush. We never knew anything. And then almost immediately I read it in the paper, and I was like, oh, Adecco bought them. That's great. And really wanted Beeline. I mean, that's what the rumor was. It's like, oh man, we really wanted.
I actually think they didn't even know about Beeline.
Really?
I think it was look what we found. I do.
Oh.
Nobody would admit that anymore.
Portfolio company that we have.
Come on, it wasn't much. And I mean, they were trying to bolster their staffing, professional services. And look, Adecco took very good care of us. We did well under their reign. But I never got the sense that they really knew what Beeline was specifically.
Right. And then when did you guys spin off again to like a PE firm?
Well, in 2016, we spun off. Adecco retained some ownership. We went to GTCR, who owned IQ Navigator.
That's right. So that's when IQN merged with you guys.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so the product IQN, how different was the product of IQN to Beeline? Was there
Well, look, at the end of the day, I always say, if you're sitting in a procurement chair, these products look similar, if we're just being honest with ourselves, right? I have a lot of passion for the Beeline product. I now have a lot of passion for the IQN products. It's under our fold. The reality is, functionality-wise, if you were to draw a Venn diagram, there's probably 80% overlap. You do things a little bit differently. The UX looks a little bit differently. Reporting's better on this platform than that one, but this one's multi-tenant, this one's not. So they had their differences. But for the most part, as I've always said, you could go with any of the top 3 solutions globally and be fine.
Right.
You could go with us and be great. But you could go with the other guys and be fine. And if you like fine, that's cool.
Fine is good.
Yeah, for some.
Fine,
for some. Yeah.
So when you moved into to the C-level, or even the president, and there was a couple hundred people at that point, give me your thoughts on like leadership. How did you? What are some of the obstacles you had to overcome?
Yeah.
And
well, I will say the masters in HR dealt a lot with leadership. So from an academic perspective, there was a fair amount that I learned from that regard. And then I think just going through the different roles that I did, I ascended through Pillsbury and got into management pretty quickly, same with ConAgra. And of course, those organizations provide world-class training as well. So there was, I would say, a fairly decent foundation. So the first thing I did when I took the role was I created 9 principles. And you guys are familiar with them.
I remember.
Yeah, and I won't go through all of them, but it was really to set the tone and kind of the boundaries of culture and how we're going to operate. When you have hard decisions or difficult scenarios, you go to your principles, and that's what helped guide it. So, I remember sitting down that night and going, gosh, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I know I'm going to take heat because 9's a big number. But as I always tell people, I still do the new hire orientations every month, and I bring out the 9 principles and talk about this notion of, I don't expect you to memorize them. I expect you to kind of live them and understand them and have them as a shield or a sword if you need them. So, for example, if I say customer service, meaning everybody except me is my customer,
Yeah, that was one of my favorite lines that you ever taught me.
Thanks.
It's like, everyone other than yourself is a customer. That's just fantastic.
But like, you're going to take care
Right.
of Microsoft, right?
Right.
You'd be idiotic not to. Do I take care of you guys with the same passion?
Right.
No, because I love you and I can get away with stuff, just like our families, right? It's a truism. So if we look at each other as our customers and we put each other on a pedestal and aim to serve, then it's a different dynamic. So again, you don't have to memorize it. Customer service is defined as I define it. You have to be successful at Beeline, treat other folks as customers. Right. So that was, to answer your question, the first thing I did was sit down and published and then presented the 9 principles.
So that was back in 2000?
That was 2010.
2010.
Like
So those 9 disciplines were 2010?
Yeah.
Wow.
Still, yeah.
Okay. So they're still, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
I mean, I've had people say I should shorten them and change them. And
but you just don't listen to them, So
well, my 10th principle I haven't published is don't listen to anybody but myself. That's not true.
That's the one that's
That's the fine print.
Yeah.
CEO eyes only. No, obviously not true. I think, look, you ask an interesting question. A learning for me was one day we're peers and the next we're not, only because of a title change. And I remember feeling somewhat disconcerted with it and curious. And I had this realization. You guys remember The West Wing?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell the story.
Show?
Yeah. I can't remember what the president's name was, but Martin Sheen played the role, right? And I was a good Catholic boy back in 2010. So I'm watching this episode, and there's a priest in the Oval Office. They're going through all this stuff. And then he basically says, well, I think it's time for confession. And he says, would you like me to call you Mr. President or Bob, whatever his name was, right? And Martin Sheen's character says, I think Mr. President. And it bothered me. I was like, gosh, the ego.
Mm-hmm. That's the line in the sand now.
Yeah. You know this guy
There's
30
a difference
years.
between me and you.
But then I realized it had nothing to do with him. It's about the office, right? And you actually want some gravitas with the office. And so as I started to think about my role, it was, people are treating you differently, not because they don't care about you or want to have a beer with you, but there is something about the office and people want to keep the sanctity of that. So for me, it was an interesting transition moving from this new role that, you and I are
IC,
and now
individual contributor.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of a different line. And I think we've always done a really good job culturally being, gregarious and have a just sense of camaraderie. But for me, it was a bit of a splash of cold water in the face to see they're acting different. I'm going to lunch by myself more often now. No one wants to hang out with me.
Oh man, I don't want to invite Doug.
Right. You can fire me now.
Right. If I order something wrong.
Yeah.
It's my pink slip.
We were supposed to have lunch beers today. Can't do it with Doug here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but those guys are all cool, and the gals with plenty of pictures and dirt they got on me, so they get away with anything they want. But yet that dynamic still existed. And I think that's an interesting lesson for everybody. Like I talked to my sales, Ron, you guys know.
Oh yeah,
running sales.
Fantastic. Yeah.
We're a sales-driven organization, which means this company jumps when you ask for something, but it doesn't mean you get to abuse everybody else in the organization. So, if you start to become onerous, then we got to have a conversation about how we change behavior. But in the heat of battle, you damn well better jump when sales says jump. And so what I've explained is it's no different from my role it's a cape you wear. The sales has a cape and you have to wield it wisely, right? And it's the same with any leadership position, I think, as well.
Right. Yeah. So if you were to give, other than the 9 disciplines and all that stuff, one piece of advice,
all that
stuff,
thanks, Pete.
Yeah, that shit that I actually had to deal with, and you had to
you pretended you abided by.
Yeah. The 10th one was the one that was my favorite.
Yeah.
But no. So one piece of advice for someone that's going into thinking about maybe coming out of college, maybe even thinking about going into management or leadership, what would you say would be your number one piece?
I've given this in the past. Just build your coalition. In other words, I've had people say, how'd you get to the corner office? I said, I didn't endeavor for the corner office. I mean, maybe secretly deep down I'd aspired, but it wasn't like I'm waking up and I'm putting a plan in place to get the corner office. I think what's so important is to build your coalition of support, because that will your ship will rise on that tide, right? So when it comes around to, hey, who do you think is next in line? You want people saying, well, the obvious choice would be Israel or Pete, and then let you all battle it out. And in my mind, that only happens when you do a really good job helping and serving others in the organization. So the coalition for me isn't, I was running sales at the time, not just having a cohort of salespeople who love me, but ensuring that I was sensitive to the needs of implementation, to product, et cetera, so that people knew they'd be well represented and you sort of earn the right to be evaluated and looked at in that regard. I always felt like, those that make it obvious that they want that job and they go gung ho for it often aren't going to get it unless they step on a bunch of people, and then it'll be short lived, or they'll be dictators like organizations, which most people don't enjoy.
Right. What did you enjoy most about sales? When you put your hand up and said, I want to run sales, what was the number one thing that you liked about it? Because we're all in sales.
I mean,
right?
I was going to say, you guys know
Yeah.
it's winning. I mean,
Okay,
it's right there.
I really like losing, so that's always fun.
I love to learn and lose.
learn and lose.
I'd be the smartest man on the planet if that were the case. No, man, I think you guys know. Like, you bust your ass, you work so hard, you try to think of these different angles, you outmaneuver, and sure, you get kicked in the gut plenty of times, but those wins are so good. Mm-hmm. And I love our industry because I think at the end of the day, we do very noble work, which is putting people to work, right? And there's nothing more noble than being able to put food on your family's table. And the fact that we have a play in that, I think that's pretty cool. So I enjoy the fact that I think our work is noble. I think we do a great job. And so, I want to win for all the right reasons, but also, I mean, it
feels good.
It does, man.
Feels
it's
good.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
With obviously, Spider-Man with, great responsibility, all that jazz. So as, you did move into the corner office and, relationships started to, not necessarily change, but they were just a little different. Mm-hmm. But then you're also seeing that you are taking on more and more responsibility, and now you're responsible. Like currently, you're responsible for north of 600 people. Mm-hmm. So with I'm a big mental health guy, and it's
same.
I've had to learn that I'm a big mental health guy by maybe tripping a couple times and being like, man, what's going on? It's like, oh, maybe I need to focus on me a little bit.
Maybe it's me.
Yeah. So I guess with all that, Doug, what would you say are some of the tried and true traits that you've learned in this journey to keep yourself grounded into somewhat block out all the noise, mm-hmm. and then be able to be centered in that I am on the right path, even then when some of your maybe mentors or colleagues are, I don't want to say second guessing,
sure,
but they are, that they're not on board.
Yeah.
And being able to, I think I ask a lot of questions there, but it's like just what.
Honestly, it's not comfortable, and it depends what your personality is. I'm not Mr. Hard charging. This is why I see it. This is where we're going to go.
Right.
I don't always believe in consensus either. I think they all have their roles. It's really situational for me. I mean, I guess on the mental health thing, what I would say is we're all insecure human beings, and the sooner you admit that, the better you are. Mm-hmm. So the reality is I'm insecure. And so knowing that, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm good at, and I've got a very good idea of what I suck at. Because people have told me repeatedly.
Soccer and wrestling.
Those are the top two. And the Reader's Digest of supermarket news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, once you know that, and I'm not trying to impress anybody, I mean, to some extent, right? We're still human beings with ego, so I want to be honest about that. But once you're open enough to say, look, I have a lot of insecurities. I know what I'm pretty good at, but I'm not so great over here. And you build a team that you trust. And I always say, if you don't like the word love, then Beeline's probably not going to be a comfortable place for you, because I think that's all that matters in the end. I just turned 58. As I say, my hourglass has more than 2/3 of the sand on the bottom. You start to realize what's important in life. Mm-hmm. And so to your point, I do have a large sense of responsibility for all the colleagues and the clients and sort of everybody in our ecosystem. But I'm not naive enough to think it's just me. Right. So there's the team element. Obviously, that's a bit of a cliche. But to answer your other question in terms of what do you do when you're convicted about something and you're getting a lot of pushback? I mean, that's just a hard situation. And you just have to go. I go back to the principles. And I could give you an example. There was trying to think about, there was a year when things weren't so good. And I shared with everybody that I thought we should take the executive bonuses off the table because we hadn't earned it. And we should basically give it to the rest of the organization. You guys are probably there and benefited from this, so you're welcome. But at any rate,
I remember that year. It was
okay.
great. No.
I think it was the year after I was let go.
No, we crushed it then. No, in all seriousness, so I took it to the team and I said, this is what I'm thinking about doing. We're going to take salary decreases. Oh, I'm sorry. I remember it very well now. So economic times were starting to look a little bit dangerous. And I said, we got to get ahead of this thing. So I think the executive should take a 20% decrease. We'll do nothing with the rest of the organization yet. But if we do, we'll have to go to 10%. And by the way, we're not going to have bonuses. And that's how we're going to save jobs. To me, it was a no-brainer.
Right.
I was disappointed in some of the backlash.
And the actual,
Well, the
response that you got
correct,
was,
right. So to Israel's question, there was a lot of pushback with like, well, I don't think I should have to give up my salary for that. We have low-hanging fruit that, maybe aren't performing. I'm like, really? Because they shouldn't have been here in the first place. So shame on you. And if we really have that, great, let's handle that because it's the right thing to do. But there's no way it's going to do or compensate for the amount of money that I'm trying to do here. And so that was an example where I said, I'm going back to 9 principles. And people first is not one of them specifically, but it falls into that same cultural approach. And so I was like, I know the right thing to do, 100%. So I said, I'll take 20%. You guys piss me off. So you take 10, but you're taking 10 and no bonuses. And we're going to make it through the storm. And we did. In fact, we ended up having a really good year where I was able to pay everybody back, which I don't think anybody expected. But that was a really good example of me feeling like, gosh,
they
weren't
you're
all
on your
against
own
me,
island.
Yeah,
right.
right. But like, I know it's the right thing to do.
Right. They probably deep down knew as well.
Well, here's what's funny. Yeah. Now, when you talk about that story, selective memory, like we all voted, this is the right thing to do. I'm like, really?
It was my idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the one that told Doug.
Doug was the one giving the pushback.
He didn't even want to do it. Right. Yeah, so, that's an example. I don't have too many of those, actually. For the most part, I'm super blessed with, again, I hire people, culture first, and then competency. So there's plenty of smart people in the world. That's not the hard part. It's finding those that are going to do well culturally. And so I've been super blessed from that regard. And I think you guys have experienced some of that. So look, we can fight about the principles, not the 9 principles. Those are not something we can fight over. But the principle of a situation, we can fight about it all day long, as long as it never gets personal. And then you got to make the call, right? And most of the time people agree and sometimes they don't. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. We'll fix it later.
Right.
So 2002, 2003, all the way till now, right? How have you seen the industry change, evolve?
Not one bit.
That's the same as 2002.
That's how I feel sometimes.
It's like Groundhog Day, right? It
is. I was on a stage a year ago and they said, hey, Doug, tell us about the new technology. What innovation have you brought? And I said, it doesn't matter. They said, why is that? I'm like, because you guys don't do anything with it. You have it for 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah, you want to talk about it in little circles here at the I won't say the conference, but at the conferences, or we want to write about it in white papers. But it is a very lethargic industry. And I don't want to be fair because industry, the ERP, not the ERPs, the enterprise, they've got a lot of categories to manage. But we've all been talking about going global. We've talked about services procurement. We've talked about direct sourcing, all these areas of opportunity that are legitimate, but have not been well realized or manifested. So there are changes in the industry. I mean, we've gone from penetration of 15% of the workforce being contingent all the way, it's 44, 46 on its way to 50% that we know of, right? So the mix of business between externals and full-time has changed dramatically, as I think we all predicted it would for various reasons. I think we've seen a change in the type of talent that's also used. We used to call it staff aug for a reason, but gosh, try to find a cybersecurity stud, and I can't find him or her and pay him, so I'm going to go out and get a part-time person.
Yeah, professional services.
Yeah,
all that
exactly.
Stuff. Yeah. So
that has changed. In my world, it has gone global, finally, right? I mean, we've got not operations, but we're in 65 countries that use Beeline, so that's grown. The services procurement has grown, but not precipitously. Direct sourcing still has a long ways to go, despite the fact that it makes perfect
Everybody
sense.
talks about it.
Everybody talks about it.
Yeah. Oh, I remember.
Total talent management. Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Very, very, very few are doing it.
Or actually doing it, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember being on stage at my own conference. I can't remember if you guys were there or not. And I said, we're talking about AI. And I said, staffing will be dead in 10 years. Now, I did that just for hyperbole and to just try to get people thinking, although the CEO of Adecco Group had.
I do remember that. Yeah, you had the phone
I got
call.
off stage and there was a phone waiting for me, much displeased.
The CEO of Adecco is waiting for you.
What are you saying? What are you saying? I mean, I don't mean it. I'm just trying to be controversial. But I was talking to
Trying
someone
to see everybody's response, I knew I was going to get a call from you.
Check inbox. Reel them in. I'm with this kid the other day who's got a really great startup going, and he's telling me that, in 3 or 4 years, it's going to boil down to 3 staffing firms, and then they'll just fizzle. And I said, you're wrong. And I get it.
Yeah.
On paper, everything you're saying makes perfect sense. Behaviorally, you are so wrong.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I actually
You're
think
way off.
You are. And look, there's actually a ton of value to staffing, which I think people are starting to realize. The pendulum's come back over.
There is.
Where now they're way more involved.
Especially now with more contingent
Absolutely.
workforce out there, right?
Correct.
So,
And
you're
even
at the
like our
40,
own
50%, they're going to be utilizing staff aug companies. I mean,
Bingo.
that's just, yeah.
And
their revenue's going through the roof.
It's still relational. Like you can AI it all you want, but at the end of the day, I still want to look somebody in the eyes and see who they are before they come into this building.
Yep.
And I don't. We could talk about the new generation doesn't care and they'll AI everything. I just don't believe that. The
I
pendulum
agree
always
with you.
moves.
I agree with you completely. Like you and I, when we worked together on Path to, I remember having a conversation with you one time on what we built at Path 2 was the digital matchmaker, right? The eHarmony of jobs.
Right,
We got sued by eHarmony, if you remember that. It was funny. But because we used their name. But I always remember talking to you.
To be fair, we didn't get sued. I think we just had a warning. And
we had a warning.
Yeah,
we did have a
Got
warning.
a letter.
Yeah.
We got a letter.
We
in the
did.
mail. Yeah.
It was stern.
Bastard. Because my ex-wife actually always responds KK.
See, she's a lovely lady.
Right,
And you're
and
flipping her off.
I always respond with K, like K,
Yeah.
or
You're the asshole.
or thumbs up, or okay,
No, you're giving her the middle finger up. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
But these nuances you wouldn't know about, right? It's just how could you?
Right.
Unless
I would have
someone's
never even. this is news to me.
But it wouldn't be
I
an
didn't
issue
know.
for together because I'd be K, and you'd be like, "Oh, he's smiling." You
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
like K, right? But on text, it's just different.
Yeah. I mean, you read emails, you read texts completely different
Totally.
than the
Right.
way that it's going to be communicated. Yeah. So I used to hate actually when I was running a sales team, I would refuse to email anything because I wanted to just meet with you.
Yeah, right.
Right. Because I didn't want you to misread it. And however you assume that what I'm saying. I used to work for a guy one time that
Pete can't type either. Just so you know.
No,
that's right. I'm not really good at it. That's why
he
I also
can't even
don't do it.
read.
I know, but he can talk.
All right, this interview's over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
No, I was saying I used to work for a guy that he was the CEO of the company, and all of his emails were in all caps all the time. And I always used to think he was yelling at me. And then I asked his assistant one time, I was like, why is it like every single email?
angry.
And she's like, oh, he doesn't know how to turn the caps lock off. So he just constantly, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. I always think he was just like, he really doesn't
and you
like
said
me
he's
at
and
all.
you said he's the
He's
COO,
CEO of the company. Yes.
Must have
the
been
chief operating officer.
Yeah. No, chief executive officer.
Oh,
it's the CEO?
CEO.
Just
yes.
goes to prove you don't need a lot of metal to be the CEO.
Very true.
Not going to say this guy's the highest brass.
No, it's not top brass.
He's not top brass.
Note to self: do everything in caps. From this point. That's a power
Just really
move.
throw people off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Where else am I going to go with more questions for you, Doug? Man, you got anything else? You got?
I mean, I've got tons of questions,
Yeah.
but I just don't necessarily know if they're worth Doug's. If that orange is worth Doug's squeeze.
He's saying, I don't think he could answer them articulately, so we're going to pass for the next guy.
No, okay. So, I mean, a lot of these questions are not necessarily for anybody listening, but more for me.
Okay.
Was there, in whether it was work related or not, was there one book? Was there one situation? What was one of the biggest? And it's the same thing that I asked Tom Rossi when he told me about the Vagrant and the how to sell newspapers. What was something that I'll go back with the book. Was there a book that you read that was so impactful? It could be fictional, it could be nonfiction, it could be anything that was. It could be that grocery store magazine that you were telling us about.
Supermarket News. How could you forget that?
Supermarket
Supermarket
News.
News.
Unbelievable.
that really kind of changed your heading. And when I say change your heading, it could be an outlook on life. It could be just.
I can give you one. I mean, look, and before I go there, let me tell you this embarrassing story. I read this book, and the guy's like, the average CEO reads 50 books a year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm an avid reader, but I'm way behind the mark and I'm failing miserably. So I endeavored to read 50 books. Now, to be fair, I used Audible, and you could change the speed. So that year I did 54. And I also recognized that I was, one day I was reading a book and I was halfway through and I'm like, deja vu? Oh, no, I must have read this 10 years ago. So I realized I have a memory issue. So I decided to journal all the important books. So I literally have probably 10 journals at home of just salient points that I picked up. So it's hard for me to say just one. Oh, and by the way, the end of that story was the average CEO does not do that. Bill Gates does that, okay? Bill Gates is no average CEO, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I actually overachieved that year and have not ever since. Having said that, my reading tastes are highly varied, so I couldn't point to one, but I'll point to an anecdote which I found fascinating. What the violin? It's on Churchill. I'm just blanking for a minute. It's absolutely extraordinary book. But
I know one you're talking about.
Yeah,
what is the name of that book? Yes.
So they talk about this moment with Churchill.
It's like the darkest hours. It's like that.
It's like that. Yeah, exactly right. So WW2, Germans are bombing them, and there are some French ships, which of course are their allies, in this harbor. And he's very concerned that the Germans are going to take command of them. So he basically reaches out to the president of France and says, "You got to move those ships." And the French guy's like, "Don't tell me what to do." He's like, "I'm just saying, yeah, you better move those ships. I'm really worried." And he said, "No." He goes, I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't move those ships, I'm going to have to bomb them. I cannot let those get in the Germans' hands, or we're going to be in dire, dire straits." And the French didn't do it. And so the part of the book I loved was he made the order and he wept and wept and wept and wept. And I love that moment because it's such a hard decision. It's a right decision. It's a horrible, difficult decision. Mm-hmm. And as strong and amazing man as he was, he also was a human with a big heart that wept for the loss of life, et cetera. So I probably have hundreds of those, but as you ask the question, that's the one that jumps out to me the most. And I think, going back to counseling and therapy and stuff, one of the things I've learned is this notion of ambivalence is really important. Two things can be true at the same time. Yes, you can have this father who's amazing, and you can also have things in your life that you wish didn't happen with the same father, right? Mm-hmm. Business is the same way. And so when you're letting people go, for example, that's a really, really difficult position to be in. I'm sure you guys have been there. You hate it.
Right.
At the same point, it's the right
it's
thing
to do.
It's
one of the hardest decisions, right?
Sometimes the decision's easy. It's the action I think is hard, right? Like the decisions are usually pretty easy. Not that you want to hurt anybody, but on paper, I don't need this role anymore, or performance isn't happening. That part's easy. The hard part is looking a friend of 15 years and saying, "Hey, man, it's not working out." Yeah. So that's kind of an example of it's still okay to feel the sadness and to grieve all that and understand that's a very viable human emotion. Mm-hmm. But back to your point with the 650 employees, you still have a responsibility and a discussion.
Yep.
Right. Like the hard things about hard things, right? There's another
great book.
There's another good book.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Splendid and the Vile. That's the book.
That's it. Yeah. That's the one. Yeah. So that's the moment. That's one of the books that you read that was just kind of like that jumps out at you.
That was actually just several years ago.
Yeah.
I'll give you another one. This one's kind of interesting. So when we merged with IQ Navigator, there was a lot. Consultants like to say synergy. In other words, there's a lot of duplication, and so you fire people to drive a bottom line,
right? Which
is not something I'd ever had experience doing, and it is a fact of life, especially under private equity. But I was sharing the angst I was going through. We've had risks before, 10, 15, but this was, I think, to the magnitude of almost 100 over the course of 3 or 4 iterations. We did 3 iterations. So phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And so there's all sorts.
I was part of phase 1, listeners.
We chose the best first, because we knew they'd land jobs quicker. That was well played. I was really, really depressed, honestly, about the situation, and I was struggling. And I knew it was my job, and I knew I had to do it, but at the same time, it's just not how I'm wired.
It's never easy. Right.
So my brother shared, who's a yoga instructor, the Bhagavad Gita, which is, and our Indian listeners would certainly know of it, and they talk about
fantastic.
Vishnu and Krishna, and the whole story is he basically has to raise arms against those that oppressed him that were actually his family members, right? And were subjugating them, et cetera. And he doesn't want to do it. And he throws the spear down And then the God says to him, look, like you can do that. You can throw your spear down. It's not a problem. If you don't have the stomach for it, there's no judgment, sort of, kind of, not really. There's a lot of judgment because at the end of the day,
I just judged you.
You got a duty.
Yeah.
So you can do that,
Right.
but you will know you never fulfilled your duty. And that was very impactful. It was an impactful read for me at the moment, just knowing like, look, at the end of the day, what's right for the organization still requires an incredibly difficult choice. And it's okay to hate the action, but you still got to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, that day turned into one of my favorite stories to tell.
I remember.
So, I was probably maybe the third person to get tapped that morning. I was early on.
Tap taparoo on the
Craig,
shoulder there.
I forgive me for dropping your name, Craig Tucker. Craig Tucker,
Master Tapper.
He's
he's done that a few times.
A lot of people.
he's in tears. Could barely.
So
he didn't
Craig.
even want to walk me down the stairs. But anyway, so I walk down the stairs. I'm outside, and then I see who's now my wife, this beautiful girl, holding a folder and just crying. And
We tapped her?
yeah, same day. Yep.
My bad. I definitely didn't want to leave Shannon.
Yeah.
Damn it.
So Shannon didn't know what to do, and then I said, "I know what to do," and I said, "Jump in my truck." We drove to the 7-Eleven down the street. I bought 2 cases of PBR.
Oh my God.
And
What was she going to drink?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's her problem.
And
That's on you.
and I bought all the Slim Jims they had, and I drove back to the parking lot.
That's awesome.
And every time someone came out with
the hood and-
a folder, I honked my horn and I gave them a beer and a beef jerky
For $10.
And
That'll be
and I
$10.
remember then all of a sudden,
Look, I just
there's
got
a
fired, so I'm going to be
ton of Beeliners looking out the window, and everybody's just cheering, just kind of like it turned into this
That's
this
cool.
Beeline
I never
thing,
heard
and
of
then
tailgating after
Yeah.
he got fired.
yeah, no, and it was just like we can. This is the first day of your next
chapter.
adventure,
Amen.
and it's like
So by the end of the day, how many people were by the truck?
well, we don't need to go there.
Yeah, thanks.
But there was a number of people,
Good-
and then
good amount of people.
Then we went to V's Pizza, and
Natural.
and then everybody just
That is a
said
great
their
story.
final goodbyes, and
I never knew that. Well,
Yeah.
Shannon didn't, but
no. Well, actually, we did because she was married at the time.
okay.
I'd just gone through my divorce,
Okay.
so and then years later, she called me and said that she was going
I got
through
a
a divorce.
PBR and a Slim Jim, big boy.
It's exactly what happened. Yeah.
You had me at Slim Jim
Yeah,
at PBR.
Wow. That's actually a really cool story.
Yeah. So
Right. It does speak to the culture, I think, and especially Craig. And, he had to bring somebody else out. I won't name the name, but he came to me. He's like, is there any way you can let me go instead of that guy? And I said, no, Craig, I pay you $10,000 a year. Why would I do this? No, I obviously didn't say that.
You're the cheapest employee I
Right.
have. No.
You're my new COO, dumbass. No, but the love for each other at that company is what makes it special. And my wife will be like, when are you going to retire? You're 58. I'm like, why would I retire? Now, should I hand the reins to someone younger? Yes. And I'm aware of that. And I always respected George Washington for, his approach to terms. But I'm not quite ready.
Right.
Able to do
Yeah, I've always
else,
felt that a family of Beeline. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I worked with you 3 different times.
Yeah.
So I just always feel like I'm still
intent.
Yeah. Just kind of there.
yeah. And the other thing is, I guess to put, even though you've obviously gotten over it, Doug, with a lot of therapy and counseling, that the things that you had to do as a CEO and letting me go, and
Not over that. No, that's fine. The Shannon one still bothers me.
I didn't even know.
I made the decision for you. I don't know
I
what
was going to say,
happened.
who fired Shannon? Because they're getting fired tonight.
They're like everybody, even the people, they were sad because that chapter was closing.
Yeah.
But there was, to this day, there's still, you can't. I've never run into anybody that I did know that was part of any number of the layoffs that has any animosity towards you or the company.
That's nice
It's
to hear.
like it's just not there.
Yeah, that's
it's
great.
not like, oh, that effing company. You know, I gave them my this and
Blood,
no, it's
sweat,
like
tears and-
things. If you understand business, then you understand the ebbs and flows of everything that happens. So
Yeah, you're one of the phenomenal leaders that I've ever worked for.
Oh, so kind. Thanks. I did have to let a friend go a year ago, and he was a little salty, and so I was like, "Are we okay?" Because like on paper, you see how this makes sense, right? And he said something I loved. He took a big breath and he said, "I'm just hurt and I'm angry, and in 2 months you and I are going to be pals again. But right now I need some space." And I said,
"Fair enough.
Call you in 60 days," and we're right back where we were,
Yeah.
right? But like human beings need time to be pissed off and to just grieve a little bit and get their shit together and go hit it hard, right?
It's an emotional thing. Right?
Yeah, it sucks. And it's hard not to take it personally, even though like a true riff shouldn't be. It's a position situation. Right? But we're still people. And
it happens.
Pete, for the record, you should take it personally just because I never got to divulge that to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I believe in transparency.
Of course you do.
Okay.
I actually, and I forgive me, Pete, I always knew that Doug really did it out of spite.
Well, I think everybody knows except Pete. That's why we're having this come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
Damn it.
You sucked at your job.
I was way wrong.
And as a human being.
Yeah.
But get therapy, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Good. Again, the interview's over.
Yeah. So, well, we are at
time.
So
yeah.
Very good.
No, it's awesome. Doug, thank you so much for being
it's fun,
here,
guys.
my friend.
Great to reunite.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
Congrats on your success. It's a great podcast series you guys are putting together. I look forward to listening to the other ones.
Yes, absolutely. We'll get it to you.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, gents.
Thanks guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, so that is a wrap for the show. Just really want to spend just a minute and thank Buzzsprout for all the support in utilizing their platform, and of course the Buzzsprout studio in San Marco in Jacksonville, Florida. Thank you to Varick Rossetti for the amazing design and logo that you did, and then also thanks to Rick Collado and Hurricane Party for providing the music that we all have an opportunity to listen to. And then thanks again to all the listeners and the supporters and the family. So couldn't have done this without you.
See you on the next cast.